Have you ever tried to picture something in your head,
Yeah.
from a book? Like say, I don't know, some crazy creature or a wild landscape, and your mind just goes duck completely blank.
Huh.
It's like trying to, I don't know, grab onto smoke or something. It's not there.
It's really interesting.
That kind of makes you realize just how much we depend on, well, our imaginations,
Yeah.
even for just the basic stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And speaking of imagination, that's exactly what we're diving into today.
It is. And what I think is super fascinating about imagination, or to be more specific, abstract thought, is that it's kind of like the bedrock for so many really important human abilities, wouldn't you say?
Oh, for sure.
We use it for everything.
Yeah,
Planning, problem solving, even to wrap our heads around like metaphors and symbolism.
totally. And for this deep dive,
Yeah.
we're looking at a really thought-provoking article from way back in 2017. The title is An Argument to Stop Watching.
Catchy.
Right.
Haha.
Yeah, I like it.
But the author is actually pretty concerned about how much we're relying on visual media these days, especially TV, and thinks it might be, well, kind of cramping our style when it comes to abstract thought.
Yeah, that's a really important point. The article makes this key distinction between concrete and abstract thought. Right. So concrete thinking, it's like, hyper-focusing on the nitty-gritty details, the stuff that's right in front of you. It's kind of like looking at a tree and only seeing the bark, but missing the whole forest.
I see.
But then there's abstract thought, which lets us look beyond what's tangible. With abstract thought, we can imagine all sorts of possibilities, think in symbols, even understand things we haven't actually experienced firsthand.
It's true. And speaking of not so pleasant experiences, the article had this really funny bit about wasabi empanadas,
Oh, yeah.
Like you don't actually need to take a bite to know that's going to be, well, let's just say a less than ideal food choice.
But our brains can actually run that whole scenario.
Yeah.
The taste, the burning, the instant regret, all thanks to abstract thought.
Exactly. It's like a built-in simulation. And it's that ability to play out different scenarios in our heads that really fuels our creativity and problem-solving skills.
That's interesting.
We use abstract thought to come up with hypotheses, imagine different solutions, and take what we know from one situation and apply it to another. It's like our brains are building these mental models, these simplified versions of complex ideas.
Yeah.
And that lets us process information, test out those hypotheses, and make decisions without having to actually physically interact with the world every single time.
Wow, I never really thought about how much our brains are doing behind the scenes. It also makes you think about how personal abstract thought is,
Yeah.
Like 100 different people could read the same exact book, but every single one of them will have their own totally unique mental picture of the characters in the setting. Think about a book that really sucked you in. What did you picture the main character looking like?
Oh, that's a great question. And I think that also kind of explains why people are often let down by movies based on books.
Good.
Because the movie is giving you somebody else's interpretation, their visual version of the story. But when you read, you get to build your own world in your mind. You're the director, you design the sets, you're even casting the roles.
You really are. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And the article makes this point that reading really encourages this abstract thinking, kind of like a mental muscle we need to be creative, right?
Definitely.
But too much TV,
Uh,
well, that might be making us a little, let's say, lazy when it comes to using our imaginations.
I'd say so.
It's like anything else. You don't use it, you lose it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to put that into like a bigger context, the article actually suggests that raising entire generations on, and I love this term they use, videocracy, could end up with a society that's just not as good at imagining or thinking critically.
I see their point.
I mean, imagine a world where people just go around eating wasabi empanadas without even a second thought.
Haha.
Okay, maybe that's a bit of a funny image, but it does kind of highlight a serious point about, what could happen if we neglect those abstract thinking skills.
I totally get what they're saying about TV, but I'm not sure I'm fully on board with this whole videocracy idea. What about things like video games or other interactive media? Don't those actually require a good amount of problem solving and creative thinking?
That's a fantastic point, and you're totally right, they do. The article is mainly talking about passive visual media like TV, where you're just kind of sitting there absorbing information. But yeah, interactive media like video games, they often need players to strategize, solve puzzles, even do some creative world building of their own.
That's true. It's a whole different level of engagement.
Right. So maybe the key takeaway here isn't about, pointing fingers at any one type of media as the bad guy, but more about finding that balance and being aware of how different ways of consuming media could be affecting how we think.
Makes sense. So just to recap everything, the article is raising a red flag about how too much reliance on this passive visual media, like TV, could be putting the brakes on our abstract thinking skills, and that might be limiting our creative potential overall.
It really could be.
Yeah.
And that brings us to a really important question for all of you listening out there. In your own lives, how do you strike that balance between taking in all of this media and keeping your own imaginations and creative thinking sharp? Are there ways you could be, actively flexing those abstract thinking muscles a little more often?
I think that's something we all need to think about. Food for thought, right?
Exactly.
Well, that about wraps things up for today's deep dive. We'll be back next week with another fascinating topic.
Until then.
See you then.